Private mobile networks aren't new, but as we move to 5G, the opportunities to deploy them are growing. But so are the security challenges. Now we have a panel discussion on deploying trustworthy networks. I would like to invite Atul Gupta, leader cybersecurity KPMG in India, to moderate this discussion. Platform is all yours, Mr. Gupta.
Good day, everyone. And I wanted to thank Economic Times Telecom for organizing a panel discussion on a very, very relevant topic. My name is Atul. I'm a partner and I lead cybersecurity for KPMG in India, as well as I am the global leader for KPMG in technology, media, and telecommunications sector. It's a privilege today to have a distinguished audience and a panel with me, which includes Mr. Mathan, who is the CISO with Vodafone Idea. Along with Mr. Mathan, we have got Mr. Manish Tiwari, who is a senior VP and CISO at Bharti Airtel. And along with Mr. Mathan and Manish, we have got Mr. RK Bhatnagar, who is a former advisor on Department of Telecommunications. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining in today. And we are going to talk upon something which is very forward-looking, the topic being deploying trustworthy networks. Two very key words over here, and that's what we're going to demystify through this session. One is trust, the other is networks. Both of these words have evolved quite significantly, and not a better panel than having each one of you to talk to each of these components. Just let me get some perspective going on these two words, and then I'll open it up to the panel to get viewpoints around the same. The first one is trust. Trust in a digital context has become extremely important and extremely relevant at this point of time. Trust is becoming pivotal for making sure that the customers are getting right viewpoints and right client centricity is being provided by organization. Trust has become very broad today, whether it is security, whether it is data, whether it's privacy or transparency or resilience and performance. So there are multiple dimensions where trust is playing a very important role. And through this panel, we will cover upon how trust in networks is playing upon a very significant role. Similarly, on networks, there's a big transformation which is happening. Telecom organizations have been right at the forefront of bringing transformational products using 3G and 4G in past, but now the quantum leap which is expected to come across with 5G on the anvil, whereby we will be having truly a machine connected onto internet, and that's feasible through the mobile broadband. And having a truly IoT organized communication, which is a machine type communication going across, there is a whole lot of possibilities of bringing critical infrastructure, which requires low latency, high throughput, and very critical environment to be maintained upon. In such an environment, trust will play a very important and a very significant role to be dealt upon with. And with all of this coming together with many components of 5G, whether it is virtualization, whether it is coming in form of SDN networks, NFV, and edge computing, trust is going to be pivotal in the way 5G gets adopted and 5G gets used upon. With that background, let me start now bringing in the panel that we have got. And there is a clear increased value which is coming at stake at this point of time. So let me start by bringing in Mr. Mathan. Mathan, there's a lot of focus on building digital trust in the digital environment. It will be great to get your perspectives, which you can share with the audience, on how this entire trust narrative is changing and how trust is becoming so centered from a customer orientation perspective as well as other stakeholders perspective. Mathan, good to hear your thoughts.
So first and foremost, in the today's context, especially in the connected world that we live in, majority of us are identified by what we call as a digital persona. Each of us have varied digital personas that help us identify in the connected world. Right? That's the first and foremost core part of it. For majority of the firms, majority of these individuals, the digital persona could be their email ID. For some, they may call it out with their mobile number as their digital persona. So these digital personas are the way that we are likely to see these individuals in the connected world, right? That's the first. Now, is there a parameter for me to go and trust basis what is coming? It's a larger quotient that is still evolving. I would not say that we have gone ahead accomplishing to the extent of trusting what the person who claims himself to be in the digital connected world. It's an evolving world. There is a lot more to evolve. See, today, at least the situation has evolved to a greater extent when it comes to trusting websites. Right? So there are neutral third parties which has the ability to provide a certificate which claims itself to be a digital certificate, which gives us the credibility that the website that we are landing is a trustworthy website and it is trusted by a third party and it is certified by a third party. But when it comes to digital persona, it is still an evolution. A long call forward for us to establish that trust. Today, it is although there are very few digital certs that are individually acquired and followed by very few individuals who have acquired to do that through. It is still a long shot ahead for us to establish that trust in the digital persona ecosystem that we have connected. Few industry verticals have taken the trust to somewhat next level. Say, if you look at a banking industry today, in the banking industry, wherever there is a relationship that is built around the, say, for example, mobile number, say all the payment ecosystems that you guys would have seen through, whenever you would have leveraged using a payment ecosystem, you put a mobile number and at the rate for a BPA or so, there is a possibility for you to verify. So there is a possibility today that trust is established in very fewer industries that are spread across. But in the digital ecosystem, comprehensively, we are still long way short to establish trust for each individual. Yeah, that's the opening thought I thought I would share.
Thank you so much for sharing those opening thoughts. Just a follow up on that. How the society is getting more and more digitally connected. Are the customers expecting that trust to be established? While we heard you saying digital personas are becoming the reality, and we are also hearing that there is a way for that evolution to go through on digital trust to be built upon. But just from a customer lens, if you could highlight upon, that will be very good to know, Mathan.
Yeah, the need for customer obviously is the need to build the trust. So he is expecting that we need to have the trust. The challenge is, like what I told, there is not much of today's credible sources which can provide the assurance that he who claims himself to be is the actual person who himself is, right? So that's where the gap is. And it will continue to evolve. That's an area anyways, I don't want to steal the thunder for the subsequent topics that are being touched upon. When more and more devices as well get connected to this connected world, this quotient is going to become even more to trust as to how these devices are getting connected, right? So it's very difficult. So we'll have to wait and watch is what I would suggest, Atul.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those initial comments, Mathan. Much appreciated to get this conversation going. On that note, let me bring in Mr. Manish Tiwari also in the conversation. Manish, we just heard upon a viewpoint coming in the digitally connected society that we are today, which has really transformed over the last 15 to 18 months. Pandemic has, if anything, the good side of the pandemic has been the acceleration of digital technology adoption. And also the advent of newer technologies coming along with it. 5G is one of those technologies which is promising a lot. If you can share perspectives on how both of these are coming closer together and what's the future looking like, or what are the benefits which the world can derive from both of these elements.
Yeah, so very nicely brought out, Atul. See, the fact is that digital transformation and convergence, if I may use this word convergence, are absolutely inevitable. I think it's not a matter of choice anymore. And that is where the world is headed. So I use digital transformation with convergence, because you have more and more services which are now converging, more and more technologies which earlier, and erstwhile technologies which were not riding on a digital bandwagon, are now converging onto the information technology space more and more. And the whole pandemic has only accelerated this process. I think the telecommunication sector is no different. So first of all, this whole advent from 2G to 3G and now 3G to 4G, and 4G, by the way, is also highly based on the IT stack. 5G, of course, as you know, will take it to the next level, and we haven't even reached 60 and 7. But 5G will be the true stack where end to end there will be a reliance on IP based technology. So the first and foremost thing is that convergence brings across a lot of good transformation. Unfortunately, convergence also brings on the aspect of the existing cyber threats which are there in the real IT world now get transposed into the telecommunication world or any other world, including those sectors which were traditional non-IT based and now converging onto IT. Right? For example, you have a manufacturing unit which was very linear and very non-IT and traditional based, and they are adopting now robotic process automation. They are employing SCADA systems. They're doing automation in their production process, and hence now a huge amount of IT element which is driving productivity at that end, and hence is also susceptible to the same cyber threats. So the point I'm trying to make is that when with the advent of this 4G and 5G, a lot of cyber risks, which the traditional cyber risks now enter the new field itself, and they have to be managed. So the question that comes is that, look, at the end of the day, how do we build scalable, resilient, agile, as well as secure systems? And my point has always been, I have always been a true believer that built-in security is always better than bolt-on security, which means that, today, if I may give an example, you have a SCADA system coming out, but even when a new system comes out, or a new version comes out, it is always on -1 generation, -1 version of, let's say, an operating system. And hence there are challenges. Or if you have to apply security patches, to the infrastructure or to an OS, then at times it is not possible because the application is not in sync, and at times the application the functionality of the application gets impacted when trying to upgrade that OS or patch that OS, any patches, and particularly security patches. So there has to be a better, better control, better synergy between interdependent OEMs and software, OEMs in the industry. Because unless that is achieved, and that can only happen if it is driven through standards, acceptable standards. So, for example, if you are at an international level as well as a national level, if today you are driving a security framework or a minimum security baseline that an organization needs to adopt, then it must be, as part of a critical infrastructure, it must be binding on OEMs to ensure that they work in sync with each other, which means that it can't be that an application owner is working on a -1 or a -2 or -3 and version, and that opens your ecosystem to a very large number of risk factors. And I'm actually talking at a very basic level. I haven't even come to at this stage to either a zero trust architecture or better encryption. I mean, all that comes, that is also important, and I'm sure we'll get to discuss it. But I think at a very base layer, we have to look at the basics once again, particularly when we are migrating and converging at such a scale. Yeah. So I'll just stop here.
Thank you so much, Manish. Great points which you highlighted, and I think one very important point you made is technology is now a great leveler. So maybe so far, industrial organization, manufacturing organizations were not exposed upon to the benefits which technology could provide. Those benefits are now available, but the challenge is also it brings along with it security issues which the technology world may have been exposed. And the second point which you highlighted on the ecosystem, I think great point. We will dwell deep on the ecosystem point as we build upon the conversation from here. But great to get started, Manish, with those inputs. Let me bring in Mr. Bhatnagar over here. So, Mr. Bhatnagar, we just heard upon things having international standards around interoperability in the 5G world, and specifically looking from a cyber or a privacy standards as becoming extremely important.
Yeah.
It would be really good to get your perspectives on how you are seeing this entire global evolution which is happening around standards for making sure that the interconnected world in which we operate, there are minimum baselines, there are ways for us to exchange information in a very secure and a credible manner.
We are actually now moving towards network that can support anywhere and anytime communication. And at the same time, we need high quality of service, which are meeting the expectations of our users. And at the same time, be robust against hardware, software, and configuration failures, and even malicious activities. So now, as for the network functionality is concerned, it is being run on cloud platforms. We are widening the bounds of technical feasibility, and we are going in for new business models. Specific characteristics that can introduce new challenges to the network management and present severe security, privacy, and trust threats in many aspects. For example, identity management, trustworthy networks, access, hardware handover and secure and trustworthy routings, authentication, authorization, accounting, management, secure data communication, and key management, especially end-to-end secure communication. These are some of the very important requirements in the present era. We also need privacy protection so that we are able to preserve the user identity. Their personal information is kept in private mode, and data privacy is also maintained. So a trustworthy mobile network, a lot of expectations are there as far as the users are concerned, that they will be getting secure, trustworthy, and highly available heterogeneous network communication. All this is possible if we are having some international standards. Everyone is trying to adhere some set of standards. ITU is working on this area under question 16 of study group ITUT study group 13. A lot of issues were addressed, and they came up with 3 set of recommendations: Y3051, Y.3052, Y.3053. So Y.3051, it covers the basic principles of trusted environment in ICT infrastructure. The basic principles is getting addressed in this recommendation. Y3052, it is covering the overview of trust provision in ICT infrastructure and services. Y.3053, it covers the framework of trustworthy networking with trust-centric network domains. So these 3 recommendations are already in place. In addition to these, work is going on right now for trustworthy media, and trust index also is being formatted through a new set of recommendations, which are in the process of formulation. What is very important is, as far as the trust is concerned, trust is actually a relative term. Trust of a party A to party B for a given task is a measurable belief of A in that B is able to accomplish dependably for a specified period within a specified trust context that is relative to the task. And the measurements can be absolute, that is referring to the probability, or it could be relative, that is the level of trust. As far as these recommendations are concerned, they go into the more details. As for the requirements of trust environment is concerned, they address the issues of predictability, information security, interoperability, then availability of administrative services. So principle of non-discrimination is very, very important as far as this one is concerned. In addition, there are certain other requirements, that is a principle of technological neutrality, functional equivalence, the principle of unification, the principle of scalability, the principle of equal reliability, principle of legalization, that is the addressing the legal related issues, principles of client-oriented architecture and systemization. And in addition, the last but not the least is the principle of finiteness. So these are some of the principles which are finding a place in recommendation Y3.51. As far as more details are concerned, details are available. In fact, ITU has come out with a very detailed report in 2017, which runs into almost 250 pages. The issue which we are addressing in today's session, all that is covered in very much detail. And as far as these recommendations are concerned, you see, these are very important. Now, in an environment, as far as the implementations are concerned, if everyone is going in a unified, that is in the same direction, we'll be able to get much better results as compared to a scenario that we are trying to build a trustworthy network, but we are not following the standards, and we are going into tangential different directions. So we need to move forward, all of us, in the same direction. And I think Department of Telecom and our leading service providers of India, they are already part of ITUT. They are taking part in the ITUT activities, but we need to keep track of what exactly is happening today, what is going to likely to happen, because ITU recommendations, they are a result of a study group work spread over 2 to 4 years period. So some of the recommendations which at present are in the process of being formulated, that also we should take note of, because they will become recommendations after 2 years or after 3 years. But if we take note of what exactly is happening, we'll be able to keep track of the latest technology. For example, 5G is there. So we should be looking forward towards not only 5G, but we should also be looking towards the developments which are likely to be there for even 6G. As far as India is concerned, we are participating in standardization formulation. We are having TSDSI also in India, and all our service providers, they are part of TSDSI, and they are very actively participating in 3GPP and GSMA related activities. So as far as I foresee, we are headed in a very good direction. Another important aspect along with standardization, just one particular aspect I would like to mention, that we should try, at the same time, try to give a focus towards the domestic manufacturing resources, because through that we have already seen that some efforts, for example, Reliance Jio in their AGM, they had announced about 5G based on their domestic R&D related activities. We have seen news reports of Tata's taking over Tejas networks. They are also trying to work along with DoT and trying to give solutions based on the domestic solutions.
Sure.
So you see, if we are able to coordinate, if we are able to do the developments, in fact, India can be the lead as far as the trustworthy networks are concerned in the coming years and coming decade. We can be the leader in that aspect. And following of the standards and following of the domestic designs, I think that is going to be the key, which I feel we can try to deploy to the best possible extent.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar, for sharing those perspectives. In fact, you highlighted quite in detail the standards which ITUT has been putting together, and it's an evolving journey. You were spot on saying there's a lot what has been done, but there's a lot which is happening still, and there is a need to adopt all of it in its entirety rather than picking and selecting upon. Maybe just one follow-up over there, Mr. Bhatnagar, what you highlighted. When organizations start looking at these standards which are emerging, there are various agencies which are operating. I heard you talking of 3GPP. I heard you talking about ITUT, obviously. There are various references coming from ENISA also, which are working upon. And many times when you start looking at these standards, they may be very consistent, but at places they would take a very strong position or a focus area where they deep dive into. Do you have any suggestion as the operator starts rolling out the new next generation networks in the country? What could be a more pragmatic approach which can be adopted? Because I heard you also highlighting saying every operator is part of the overall ITUT forum. They have benefits of having access to the information. I think in today's world, access to information is no longer a constraint, which is already established very clearly. It's about how do you bring that pragmatism in deploying upon the standards which are emerging, and there are multiple standards which are coming across at this point of time. So if you would just like to highlight that, that will be very helpful for our audience, Mr. Pathan.
In fact, one area I would like to indicate, you see, as for the ITU recommendations are concerned, they are very, you see, word is recommendations. They are not mandatory for any country or any service provider. They become mandatory only after the regulator or the licensor or through any regulation or any sort of a government order, you mandate that is required to be done. So you see, in a way, it is a sort of a guidance. Okay, these are the recommendations. If you follow these recommendations, there will be issues related to interoperability, for example, they can get addressed. Right now, you see, I'm doing a consultancy for a mobile operator, Ordu in Oman. So therein, you see, I observed that though ITU recommendations are available, all the processes which were developed by them, they are not following the ITU recommendations. So when I told them the initial problem, they were quite worried. I told them, you see, as far as your processes are concerned, they are based on another international industry, one of the best practices solution, which is coming from ITIL, for example. So you need not worry on that count. ITU recommendations are there. If you can follow, it will be good for the long run. But as the development process is in a service provider, you see, as far the development cycle is concerned, some development might have taken place 10 years back, some might have taken place 3 years back, some they are going to do in future. So at least whatever you have done up to now, so long it is not disturbing the requirements of the regulator or the licensor, there's no problem. But at least in future, whatever development activities you are trying to do, at least to the extent possible, all operators, if we are following ITUT,
right,
so maybe we can follow ITUT. So that is my suggestion.
Sure,
in that
sure.
regard.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar, for sharing those perspectives. And you are spot on. Many times these global standards are references and recommendations. I think it's adoption which will really make the shift coming through. Yeah. But great points. Thank you for highlighting those perspectives and sharing with our audience today. On that note, let me go back to Mathan. Mathan, we just heard upon important inputs coming in, and we also know about complex ecosystem in which an operator operates, and there are multiple factors which play into it. Can you bring in a practical viewpoint on how, when we talk of a journey on creating a trustworthy network, what are some of the constraints or some of the considerations which go across by an operator?
Interoperability and trust amongst network is not a new phenomenon that we are trying to establish. So when it comes to the interoperability part and trustworthiness, that has always been there. Now, the newer phenomenon that is evolving now is I would trust, but then I would want to verify. Yeah, trust but verify is the manner that we are evolving to. So to the context that if we are looking at in an interoperable and a connected network, whenever there is each of these network comprise of multiples and multitudes of devices that come our way, right? So you could take the viewpoint of looking at each of these devices coming in from trusted sources, one way to look at it, or otherwise you should have the ability to assess these devices ourselves, to perform tests and understand if these devices are truly trustworthy enough for them to get connected to the network. One of the area, while Mr. Bhatnagar is here, India relatively still tries to build, especially in the telecommunication spaces, testing such kind of equipments, right? So the ability for us to test is still a long way forward for us. While there are labs getting established, there are fewer that are available in the country now as we have, who has the ability to test some of these equipments, but which still we are a long way short for from a domestic standpoint, both from manufacturing as well as from testing capability. So here, the ability for us to trust is we are largely believing by the brand of the supplier that comes our way as the first trust in the today's connected world context, right? So the brand. And obviously the brand supersedes for the supplier so crucially that a malicious practice intentionally is something that the supplier may choose not to have, right? May choose not to have. That's the first level of trust that we are having, which is where today for us to verify, most often there is a lot of work when it comes to the cybersecurity professionals in terms of assessing some of these devices. We would not want to tell that we are testing these devices, but assessing them from these are again the tests that are carried out are not to rip open these devices to find out any backdoors or so, but generally followed interoperable best practices, if they are being followed or not, are a few of the things most of these operators, including as Airtel or all of these operators, have the capability today to at least assess at a superficial level. I would not say that the ability exists from the engineering efforts to go and decode them through, but yeah, at a superficial level to guarantee that these are equipments that are free of some of these backdoors, trojans, malwares, etc., to permit them from a connection standpoint. So again, so it's a large word, long shot. India lacks capability today, but we are on the journey to build those capabilities.
Oh, absolutely. I think very, very fair point saying when you said interoperability and trust has been there, but today it's trust and verify, which is the new mantra. And obviously in that trusted sourcing of network equipments is one very, very big component. And as a country, we are on that path. As we have already seen, there have been few big strides which have been taken in the country by identifying pre-qualified or pre-cleared devices as well. And as you highlighted, labs are in action, which are coming through for helping the testing facilities to come through. But at the same point of time, I think very important point which you highlighted, Mathan, as operators, you cannot bring down your diligence. So doing assessments at your end will play a very important role, which will be there. But thank you so much for making that point. I see, Mr. Bhatnagar, you wanted to make a point. Maybe I can take your point and then I'll go to Manish. Tell me, sir.
You see what Mr. Mathan has mentioned. Recommendation Y.3052 is actually addressing all these issues. It few lines from that I will just read out. The recommendations provides an overview of the trust provisioning in information and communication technology infrastructure and services. It introduces the necessity of trust to cope with potential risk due to lack of trust. The concept of provisioning is explained in the context of trusted ICT infrastructure and services. From the general concept of trust, the key characteristics of trust, they are described, and the trust relationship model and trust evaluation based on conceptual model of trust provisioning, they are introduced. So this particular recommendation describes trust provisioning processes in the ICT infrastructure.
Right.
So this particular recommendation Y.3052 is actually addressing what Mr. Mathan has just indicated.
No, absolutely. And that's a great thing about international standards. They obviously are bringing to life the problems which operators are facing or the ecosystem is facing. So, it's great to hear the correlation between what Mathan highlighted as concerns and how the standards are bringing those concerns to be objectively addressed upon. So thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar, for bringing that perspective in. Very, very relevant, very well said. Let me bring in Manish over here. Manish, we heard three different dimensions. We started with a dimension on digital transformational environment. And you brought in a very good perspective saying it's not just digital transformation, but it's convergence which is happening. And that convergence has led a need to have a trust being created, because if you don't have that right trust, that fabric which gets everything going, maybe somewhere starts having a breakpoint within itself. So that's what we heard upon. Then we heard from Mr. Bhatnagar saying there are standards which are emerging, which may be recommendatory in nature. Adoption is up to the providers, adoption is up to the ecosystem partners, which have to play upon. Mathan brought in a very important perspective saying how trust has always been there, but today it's trust and verify, because that's the scale at which it's moving upon. But let me bring a fourth dimension to you, Manish. And again, as an operator, the operator's viewpoint is to bring and create more and more value for its stakeholders. And if I was just to look at one segment, which is the customer, network plays a very important role, but then comes upon the value added services on top of it. And they have to seamlessly work with each other. We already talked upon on the integration. And that's where it brings a huge question saying, how do you bring in a consistent standard which operates or permeates across all of them to provide an end-to-end trusted environment? I know it's a very big question which I'm putting to you, a large one. I heard you talking on digital trust, zero trust also a while ago. Maybe this is the opportunity to get your thoughts on that one.
So, Atul, very valid question that you brought out, that moving away from infra level security, or rather security more at the end, or at a corporate network level, or internal security. I mean, how do you take value added services to a customer to basically so that they are probably better off? So when we talk about value added services, there are tons of value added services. Today we have OTT players who are in the market. You have content creation. Today you can come on to the Airtel Thanks app and buy a lot of services, a lot of content, lots of stuff out there, right? But I'll restrict myself to one category that that's quite dear to me. So what is it that we have seen in the last roughly 1.5 year, almost 1.5 year? We've seen a huge shift in the way, in the way people's lives have been transformed. And at least for the foreseeable future, we are going to see a very different world. It's more than a year now. It's going to be almost 2 years since children have not gone to school. They are basically studying from home. For an extended period last year, a lot of people, office goers, were working from home. Critical applications which generally would not be accessed or were not accessible outside the corporate network had to be given access outside the perimeter. So it was truly the anywhere, anytime computing. Wives also, they're professionals, most of them today. Even for your day-to-day purchases, you were dependent upon online retail, purchasing things for home delivery. So the life in general has moved online considerably, and unfortunately that has also increased threat to individual users of the World Wide Web or the internet per se. And please understand that whilst you and I, we belong to mature organizations, we have a certain amount of we have fairly robust security at our endpoints. But during the last 1.5 year, I think there have been very robust sales of endpoint devices like laptops and tabs for personal use, right? And we know that these don't come cheap. The application on these at times costs almost 30% of the cost of the hardware, if I'm talking about the operating system. Now, can you imagine the some basic tenets of security, endpoint security, which we take for granted when using our endpoint devices, which are our company-owned endpoint devices? That kind of protection is not there at times in most of the cases when people acquire personal devices. In most of the cases, it is due to ignorance. In many cases, it is because of the added cost. And in this last 1 year, people have had to spend a lot of money to buy these devices, which they were extending themselves any which ways and hence this propensity of not wanting to spend more money on endpoint security. So the first and foremost thing that we wanted to do was, partner. See, we are not an OEM, but we wanted to partner with global players who would partner with us and help bring endpoint security for devices, whether a mobile or a laptop, irrespective of what operating system you're using, at a wonderful cost. And we did that. We joined hands with a global player, and we have launched, very, very high quality endpoint protection, product, which is available for Airtel customers on our digital store. And this has been given, it's a value added, it is available on our digital store. So, and it is available at a very, very competitive price. And this whole point was that, look, can we give something which is low, which is world-class product, but at a very, very considerable cost, as low as possible to our customers, so that they can protect their children, they can protect themselves when using their devices, online, where the threats also we have seen increase manifold. And we have seen a large amount of personalized attacks, right? Fraud impacting, individuals rather than, whilst we have seen companies being attacked and ransomware, but I would say personal fraud has also gone up to a very, very large extent during this pandemic period. So that was one. The second thing is that with so many children now across the world, particularly and of course in India, spending so much time online for doing their homework or doing classes day in and day out, is a huge amount of exposure to the internet to a child. And we wanted to bring out some aspects, something what I refer to as child safety. And very glad to share with you that in February this year, actually we did a pilot launch last year itself for some of our circles, but global rollout was done in February this year. So we launched for our broadband internet users, we brought a value added service which gave child safety configuration for their internet traffic. And they could they have some very basic, I mean, we wanted to keep it very simple, Atul. So we just gave basic, malware online protection, followed by child safety, study mode, work mode. That's it. 4 simple things which they can simply change from the convenience of their, Airtel application, the Thanks application itself. So they don't even have to download a separate application for that. The interface is provided in the existing Thanks app, and irrespective of where they are roaming in the country or even outside, they can change the configuration based on what they choose, for their home broadband, and hence, and in this case, the most important thing which is dear to me was basically the child safety mode, and this is catching traction with customers. On the enterprise side, we wanted to do something really great for our customers. See, we have seen a huge increase in ransomware attacks. We have also seen a huge increase in attempted distributed denial of service attacks, right? So we partnered, last year we partnered with one of the global firms, Radware, to bring the first global scrubbing center in India. India has not had a global scrubbing center. Most of the firms, when they deploy their DDoS inline or whatever, they deploy their solutions, they deploy it largely on-prem. And one of the closest global scrubbing centers of most of these firms is basically Singapore. So we wanted to change that. India is an important country, and we partnered with Radware so as to set up a global scrubbing center out of our data center here in India. And hence now our Indian customers, whether they are using our connectivity or not, we can provide them in partnership with Radware, we can provide them with in-country hosted service, rather than the fact that, look, the service might result in your traffic being routed from outside the country. So this has impact not only on the performance, but this also addresses, a lot of concerns around data residency, etc. And this is something that took a lot of effort, but we have done that. Sure. And in addition, what we are trying to do is basically, particularly for the small and mid-segment companies for whom cost, Atul, is such a major factor. We have tried to bring, bundle security solutions on the connectivity they buy from us, more from an OpEx as well as a managed model, saying that you don't have to do anything, you don't have to buy anything, we will position it, it's an OpEx model, and we will also manage it for you. Long story cut short, that is how we've been trying to bring value-added services to our customers, and at the same time seeing that how can we push the bar to the next level, whether on our enterprise or on the retail segment.
Thank you, Manish, for highlighting. And I think you took the conversation to the next level, and you rightfully started by saying infrastructure, and on top of infrastructure is this entire ecosystem of application which is disseminating the services. Services, whether it's to a common citizen, services which is to a child who is exposed to internet, services whether it's to enterprises or to SMBs. And you talked on various initiatives which are required or which are already being worked upon and being provided upon, which is phenomenal. And each one of those really touched upon, and you were right, emotionally very attached to the one which is on the child safety. And as a firm, we also run a lot of child safety programs in form of awareness increase and so on and so forth. So rightfully highlighted. But I think I want to take a leap from here, Manish, and I want to extrapolate this. Today, we have talked of communication, which we are very familiar with. But tomorrow's network is going to provide us managing critical environments. We are talking upon autonomous vehicles to come. We are talking upon surgeries being performed by robotics, which will be purely based on these networks. We are talking of very low latency,
Yes.
very high throughput network. And over there, any opportunity of a vulnerability or a weakness to come in can have catastrophic impact. So if we can just, or I can request you, Manish, to extend this to the future of what the promise is really coming in, the learnings which have come on so far, how can they be extended? That will be great input for our audience.
Absolutely. So Atul, you brought out this is largely in the domain of 5G, right? And see, 5G at best for a retail user would mean, flashing speeds for downloading or, watching a very heavy movie or a video online. But that is not, that is, and yes, why not? But I think the true essence of 5G would be largely, in various other fields. You mentioned about autonomous cars. You mentioned about remote surgery. Can you imagine the implication of that in a country like India? Having said that, there are large portions of this country, particularly in the mid segment, which need better coverage, and it has to be financially viable also. But typically, I think the biggest use of remote medical services is obviously in areas where you cannot easily have, medical services. Let us also talk about let's also talk about drones. I think that is something which is coming up. Typically drones are referred to or spoken to only in military terms, but I think the potential for using drones in our country in non-military usage is phenomenal. You can use drones to deliver very critical medical supplies to slightly inaccessible or inhospitable areas in the shortest possible of time with zero risk and at very low cost. They can be used to do a lot of critical work. Again, you require very low latency, and obviously you need very high security. So largely what we are now bordering on is the realm of what we refer to as the Internet of Things, the IoT space as well. And one of the things that we require out here in terms of security is that, look, along with security and a zero trust architecture, this particular framework would also require a phenomenal amount of resiliency, because failure is not an option. And if you're doing remote surgery, then probably 99.99% is not a good enough scenario. And hence all this has to be factored into the use cases. I mean, everything has to be dovetailed with the use cases. All I'll say is that, look, I think the government is doing a lot in terms of introspection on how these new age technologies are going to impact our critical infrastructure and national cybersecurity or national security. So, they are not only concerned; they are basically working on these aspects. And perhaps one of the lines that was, like one of my colleagues brought out, is build a further capability and capacity with respect to testing of not only hardware but also applications, because everything is going to be cloudified and virtualized, of applications which are going to go into our critical infrastructure, including 5G architecture.
So
And
true.
why this has to be scaled up is because we need to have agility as a country, and as a sector, any sector, we need to have agility, which means that it cannot take very long for approval cycles. So any approval or any development or any this thing has to work very seamlessly as a sort of cooperation in a public-private partnership, with the government playing the role of a regulator, and very clearly, particularly for critical infrastructure, ensuring that they have the capacity and the capability, build up on the capability. So they have the capability, they have the capacity. It just needs to be scaled up by many, many times over. And they are mindful of the fact, and they are doing it so that going forward tomorrow, it doesn't become a bottleneck or a choke point. So
very well said. Very well said.
so I think these are the things which probably need to be done, irrespective of which sector these kind of technologies are deployed in.
So true, so true. I think you touched upon some very, very great aspects on how the future can emerge upon. And given the promise which 5G is bringing along with it, there's so much more to be done. So great points, whether it was on resilience, whether it's on bringing a zero trust approach, whether it's bringing in agility or PPP models, scaling ability, skill availability, all of this very, very fair points. On that note, let me go back to Mathan. Mathan, I just want to bring you in again over here because Manish talked upon on this entire ecosystem. And again, from your perspective, the future of the communication, the possibility which is there, the really talking upon, I think Manish put it out more as use cases, but the possibility which comes across or comes along with the power of technology. But as it is said, whenever it's very powerful, it brings in a lot more responsibility and a lot more accountability. What would be your suggestions for our audience at this point of time, saying how this entire world of digital security or digital trust is going to be more and more important and more relevant with the technology advancements that's going to come across, Mathan?
Two things. While a larger part of our conversation today is revolving around the connectivity part of it, right? So the interconnectivity part of it is what we are touch basing, wherein Manish talked about 5Gs and touched upon also some of the use cases. In the entire context of IoT, Internet of Things, that they would connect back into the connected world, there is also expansion happening on the data side of it. Is right. The sensors, we are missing the core point on the sensor. There is a lot more of data that is essentially supposed to be sensed, processed, and sent back to some logic for a very active decision making process. 5G will only enable that it serves the conduit for from the sensor to the decision making area where it has to happen. There is already a debate that is happening as to should we take the decision making closer to the source. So in a completely automated self-driving vehicle or so, should we take the decision making to a cloud, public cloud, or should that be there locally closer to the car itself, right? So if there is a sensor which sees there is an object that is coming our way, imagine the sensor is sensing and sending the data to a cloud, and the cloud has to send back the impulsive data that please apply brake now. And if there is a if there is a connectivity lapse, what would land up happening? So there are still evolution that is happening around that space as well. While there is 5G that will prove or that will at least evade away the need for the communication labs that will happen. On the compute side, for a faster aggregated computation, there is still a lot more work that is happening in that field as well. I'm sure we will not for this topic, we will touch upon quantum computing and things like that. But then there are evolution that is happening around how quicker and how faster are we able to process this data. That has to go hand in hand with the connectivity to ensure that the concepts that we are speaking become a closer to reality in the real time sooner days to come through, right? So that's the second part that I thought data sensing, and then the relevance of sensing, what to sense also plays a very, very crucial role today, right? So yeah.
No, you're spot on, Mathan. I think it's 5G in a way is considered to be the channel for taking all of these use cases to run upon on top of that. And you brought in a great point of view from sensors and data which is being created. A simple use case could be smart cities. You talked on autonomous vehicles, but smart cities is a great use case which is already emerging at this point of time, and how real-time processing of information is required. And with MEC as a technology emerging, a lot of questions possibly getting onto that, saying how the edge should be playing a big role in this entire design approach which is coming. I think completely appreciate there's a long journey for us to evolve, but inherently, and to the point which Mr. Bhatnagar made, saying there is a need for this entire network on which everything is going to run upon to be very trustworthy. And there are those principles which are emerging to make sure the trust runs across the entire channel, not just at defined layers. And the shift is coming because with 5G, unlike in the traditional world, the network used to be completely segregated, but this is now becoming more and more converged upon with the traditional IT world, bringing in virtualization, which is so very familiar. We are so very familiar in the traditional technology world, and we know the challenges also of virtualization. It brings its own benefits also. When we talk of packet slicing, today that ability is coming in for us to deal with sensitive communication. But yeah, there are challenges and issues which are also coming with it. So thank you, Mathan, for making that point. I know we are getting almost to the close of our time, and maybe I'll quickly run through, and I'll start with Mr. Bhatnagar. Mr. Bhatnagar, you shared very good perspectives on saying standards, recommendations, adoptions for interoperability. Any closing points which you will have for our audience? You know, the best way could be 3 closing points which you would like our audience to start using as a good takeaway from the forum that we had today.
Okay, we need to show the creation of evidence for trustworthiness. You see, as far as all stakeholders are concerned, whether it is the operators, it is the service providers, it is the regulator, it is the government. You see, for all of them, the measure of trustworthiness that is required to come. And for that to come, we need to have confidential computing and secure identification to build trust. You see, so this is an area where some R&D is required to be done. Another area where we need to work upon is on artificial intelligence. You see, that also will bring in other dimension as far as trustworthiness is concerned. You have rightly said about virtualized, highly virtualized network and dynamic environment we are going to have for 5G and beyond. And for that to work, you see, the next generation of confidential computing there, that is going to be very, very important. And in that respect, the standards are going to play a very, very important role. Even if at a stage we feel because ITU recommendations, they're not, some of the recommendations, they're not really relevant to the country. Maybe all stakeholders, the leading service provider, they can sit together. So at least the implementation in India, at least that part can be uniform. Say for all leading operators, they are doing different type of implementations. So you see, interoperability will become an issue at a later stage. You had also mentioned about smart cities. You see, I've seen that in smart cities implementations, some implementations are taking place with non-standard architecture is being followed in some of the implementations. What you'll find after some time, some application working in some smart city, like a smart transport system of Chandigarh, and the vehicles are coming from Chandigarh, vehicles are coming to Delhi also. Delhi is having a different type of system, and they're not able to interwork with each other. So you see, these type of issues become very, very important. For trustworthiness of the networks, you see, that will be really getting implemented in India if we are all in the same direction, moving in the same direction. If we are having a car and everyone is trying to push the car in the same direction, you see, that will definitely move. But if forces are there trying to push the car in different directions, will be just stationary. So that is the type of scenario actually I'm trying to point out. So standards are important, but we need to have a national standards, and you see, the implementation, the sourcing, etc. If they are taking place from same set of the sources, you see, there will not be any difficulty. Because in ICT world, it is not just the hardware, the software, the implementation. You see, there are so many dimensions required to be addressed.
Very true. Very true. You summed it up very well, Mr. Bhatnagar. Standards to be adopted from global standards, but to create local standards which work in the country, so that you can bring the peculiarity of the country also into play. Interoperability, I think telecom as a world has found a way to operate interoperability very well, but it's the potential use cases which are emerging with the new network, and how do you make sure those interoperability mechanisms are aligned around that one. And I think you talked on AI also. And there's a big debate over there also, Mr. Nagar, on saying, how do you bring trust in AI? Because it's learning on its own constantly. So there's a long way to go on that bit as well. But very, very thanks to highlight those points. Let me quickly go to Manish. Manish, 3 points from you for the audiences from today's conversation.
So adding on to what Mr. Bhatnagar said, see, interoperability is something which any which ways service providers will achieve. That's a mandatory requirement. I don't think that's an issue. I think intertrust is the factor that is most important, because today, and it is not just national. Atul, you could be traveling outside, and when you are moving from one service provider to another, how do you should be able to sort of trust that environment as well. Now, I think whilst international standards will hopefully ensure that, at least at a national level, beyond standards and standardization, what is really needed is something which is closer, 30 feet to the ground, which is basically a framework. So this is something again which the government is seriously considering and working on. Various stakeholders is, whilst for critical infrastructure you would have a common set of baseline security requirements. There would be additional this thing which probably would be built up sector specific wise, because for the banking sector, so while some amount of issues would be common to everybody, because finally it is cybersecurity and the same components go in. However, depending upon which sector you belong to, you would have a very different set of risks and and hence mitigation strategies and architectural design requirements as well as control. So probably for the banking sector it would be slightly different. For the telecom sector it would be different. And I think that is the God lies in the detail.
Right.
It has to be something which is practical. It has to be something which allows the adoption of new age technologies, because eventually the inability to adopt new age technologies can also hamper your ability to protect your ecosystem, because new age technology also includes new age cybersecurity products and services. So everything has to go hand in hand. And I think it is extremely important that at this juncture, if we talk about the telecom sector, that there should be a working group formed between various stakeholders on the government as well as on the telecom service provider side, where they work together to basically, whilst working within the requirements of national requirements, national cybersecurity, national critical information infrastructure requirements, but at the same time, this also takes into account the practicality, the agility, the scalability and speed with which business today has to react in order to be actually, not only viable, but to be able to give that kind of high quality service to our customer. So whatever we make, particularly when we transform going forward from where we are today into the next generation, it's very important that we work hand in hand through a collaborative and a constant workshop model, so that there is eventually, it doesn't not just benefit the industry, but it also addresses all national issues going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for beautifully summarizing. I think you brought in an important element on intertrust, bringing in need not just for standards, but frameworks and working groups. And you also talked upon on practicality of how this can be used upon. All very relevant points. Thank you so much, Manish, for contributing to that. Mathan, your thoughts, and since you highlighted on data as well, maybe if you can also touch upon some bit on data, and there are elements around that which are coming across. So happy to hear your closing thoughts, Mathan.
No, sure. So today, conversation is largely around deploying trustworthy network, and if any corporate, for that matter, is attempting to do this, deploying trustworthy network, the first and foremost thing that we should keep in mind is the customer himself. The consumer. There are remarks that consumer is always the king. While it is seen in the consumer market, even in the digital world, with regard to the data, consumer is perceived the king completely. So any data, and you asked me to touch upon data. So data, majority of the folks land up believing that we are the owner of the data, and we fail to acknowledge most often failing to acknowledge the fact that the consumer is the owner of the data that it corresponds to him, right? So while we have to build a trustworthy network, it is important to keep the consumer in the heart of it and build every aspect of security, resiliency, whatever we land up building around presuming that the data belongs to him. Right, so that's how I look up how we would want to build this through in the interconnected world. I will leave it there.
You are so right, Mathan. There's always a huge confusion around who is the owner of the data, and sometimes in overwhelming ways we try to own data while we don't own data. So your point is very, very valid. But having that clarity is so very important, and so much more in the world which is going to come, where we are talking of high volume of data exchange. We are already seeing a huge volume of data inter-exchange happening, but the reports predict this decade will see the maximum volume of data growth which is going to happen. And if in that decade we don't have clarity on who owns data, who needs to protect data, then we are not going to address this agenda very conclusively. So thank you. Thank you so much for making that point. On that note, I wanted to thank each one of you, Mathan, for great insights, insightful viewpoints being shared upon. Manish, for bringing in a practical viewpoint, saying how, as an organization, you have already moved ahead and what's the need which is required upon over here. And Mr. Bhatnagar, for bringing in a perspective, saying how standards are evolving and emerging and what's the need of the hour at this point of time. I think all three of you have brought in very, very salient points, which, if brought together, can really help us to move forward on the journey where we said, how do you deploy trustworthy networks? So I'm very thankful, and I'm sure the audiences are going to get a lot valued from our conversation today. On that note, I would like to thank each one of you and thank the sponsor for organizing this event today. It's going to be a lot of value add for everyone who is going to be going through this conversation. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for sharing your inputs on deploying trustworthy networks. With this, we have come to the end of this conclave. Now I would like to invite Mansi Taneja, Associate Editor, ETTelecom.com, for closing remarks. Over to you, Mansi.
We have come towards the end of the India Mobile Conclave. At this point of time, I would like to thank all the speakers and attendees for making this event such a big success. Look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mansi, for touching the highlights of the conclave. Now it's time to wrap up. I, on behalf of the ET Telecom team, would like to thank all the speakers for gracing this event by their presence. My special thanks to the audience for their active participation. Finally, our gratitude to all the partners for believing in our concept. Once again, thanks to all of you. Take good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Stay safe.